The Scream of the Haunted Mask, Chapter 24. The kids were screaming and crying. They ran in circles around us, tugging at their paper masks. Sabrina took a timid step closer. I stared at her in shock. Laura floated to the floor. She lowered her fists and turned her angry red stare on Sabrina. "I was only trying to help you, Carly Beth," Sabrina said in a frightened whisper. "I sneaked into your house and took the mask from your basement. I knew you weren't safe with the mask in your house. I buried it outside the stable. No one ever goes there." So that was the patch of freshly dug dirt. I thought it was a grave. "Get it now," Laura ordered. "Dig it up, bring it to me, or I'll make these kids suffer even more." "You can't get away with this," Clark roared. I jumped back as he leaped into the air. He reached out both hands to tackle Laura to the floor, but Clark's hands went right through her. A ghost. You can't tackle a ghost. She rose off the floor. She pointed a long finger at him and gave him a cold, hard stare. "No!" Clark let out a startled scream as she held him in her stare, and he went sailing backward across the room. Crack! His head slammed into the wall with a hard jolt. He uttered a groan and then slumped in a heap to the floor. With a cold smile on her face, Laura turned to me. "See what I can do?" she said. "Would you like to see the kids go flying head first?" She waved me to the door. "Stop stalling, Carly Beth. You know you have no choice. Go dig it up. Bring me the haunted mask." She was right. I had no choice. I ran out the glass door with the kids' wails and shrieks of pain ringing in my ears. A blast of cold wind pushed me back. Hugging myself, I lowered my head and ran across the backyard toward the stable. My breath steamed up in front of me. My shoes crunched on the frosty, hard ground. The tall grass blew from side to side. Pale silver moonlight made a path in front of me as I ran. The lighted path disappeared as I stepped into the darkness of the apple orchard. I hurtled through the blur of tree limbs and branches and dark trunks trying to block my way. My side throbbed with pain and my dry throat ached as I reached the stable. I found the path where Sabrina had buried the mask. I didn't wait to catch my breath. I dropped to my knees and began to heave up dirt with both hands. It didn't take long. Sabrina hadn't buried it very deep. I pulled it up from its shallow grave. The mask felt warm. I shook the dirt off it. It stared up at me as I held it in my trembling hands. I raced through the orchard to the farmhouse. Would I be in time to save those poor kids? Could I save them? Would Laura really release them from their masks? Shivering from the cold, I stepped through the front door. I held the mask in front of me. The kids were quiet now. Their screams had stopped. Some were lying on the floor, weakly tugging at their masks. A few were huddled together in a corner, crying softly. Laura rushed forward to meet me. Her eyes gleamed when they landed on the mask. "Give it to me," she cried. "I've waited so long. I need it." Breathing hard, my whole body shivered. I started to hand it to her. She reached for it. Her pale eyes flashed with excitement. I pulled it back. The mask will make Laura even more evil, I thought. She doesn't want it back so she can finally go to her resting place. She waited for the mask all this time so she could do more evil. If she gets the mask, she will destroy us all. "Give it," Laura whispered. She made a wild grab for it. "Give it to me, Carly Beth." I could feel her ghostly powers, so strong and cold. I could feel the pull, feel her pulling my arm, pulling the mask to her. "No," I choked out. I made a terrifying decision. Someone had to save the kids. I gripped the haunted mask by my sides. I raised it high, and I pulled it down over my own head. Chapter 25. I gasped. The warmth of the mask burned my face. I could feel the mask instantly start to tighten, but I knew I had to fight evil with evil. I heard the children screaming. I turned and saw them tearing off their paper bag masks. Their faces were red and drenched with sweat, but they were laughing and crying and jumping up and down with joy. All of Laura's attention was on me. She had released her hold on the kids. Mrs. Launch ran in. "What's all the screaming?" she asked. "I had a problem in my office. Her face went pale. She saw Laura and me facing each other. She saw me in the haunted mask. Her whole body shuddered. Without another word, she gathered up the kids and hurried them out of the farmhouse. Laura's flaming eyes were locked on mine. "You fool!" she screamed. "Take it off! Give it to me!" I could feel the mask shrinking against my skin. attaching itself to my head, and I could feel its evil pouring down on me, like ice water filling my body. "You fool," Laura shouted again. "I wanted to destroy the mask. I didn't want to wear it." "Liar," I cried. My voice came out raspy and deep behind the mask. I knew she was lying. With a cry, Laura leaped forward and grabbed the mask with both hands. "Give it to me. It's mine. It's mine. You'll pay. I'll make you pay." She tugged at the cheeks, then raised her hands to the top of the mask and pulled. "No, let go. Let go," I screamed. The mask was stuck to me. It was part of me. The ugly mask was now my face. I could feel the hot anger burn my chest. I couldn't control my rage. I let out a furious roar. I wasn't me anymore. I was some kind of beast. "You're doomed, Laura. Tonight you face your doom." Grunting like an animal, I lunged at her. I made a grab for her. Missed. My hands pushed right through her. "You can't escape me, Laura," I roared. I saw a flash of fear on her ghostly face. She swung away and ran out the glass door to the back. I saw her running across the backyard, and I took off after her. Into the cold, windy darkness, my shoes pounded hard over the frosty ground. The tall grass flattened as I plunged through it. "You can't escape, Laura," I growled. She floated over the pasture, her hair flying behind her. I raced after her, arms outstretched. Silence fell over us, a deep, frightening silence, and then, running hard, I tilted my head back and roared out a shrill cry. Not a cry from me, not a cry from Carly Beth. The cry came from the mask. It was the scream of the haunted mask. The mask had taken over my mind and my body. The mask had won. Chapter 26. My scream rang out over the empty pasture. It was an animal cry, not human, a scream of pure anger and raging evil. I screamed again and again and felt the mask burn itself to my skin. I screamed as I ran, and then the scream stopped with a gasp of surprise. I heard a rumbling sound. Painting like an animal, I listened, and heard the whinny of horses, and the soft thunder of hoof beats. And then a dozen ghostly horses came galloping out from the blackness of the orchard trees, pale, pale horses. Their white manes flew behind their raised heads. Their eyes glowed an icy blue. Their mouths were open, as if in a permanent cry. The ground shook. The tall pasture grass whipped in all directions. The ghost horses galloped together. They held their heads tall and high. Their glowing blue eyes were trained on Laura. Laura uttered a cry. She couldn't escape. The horses swirled around her, galloping faster and faster. I stared in amazement as they became a cloud of white, a loud, frightening blur of ghostly blue eyes and whinnies and screams and pounding hoofbeats. And then the cloud faded. The horses slowed and pulled away from the whirling circle. Silence now, a heavy, hushed silence. The grass stopped in its wild dance. The wind didn't blow. No more screams. Laura was gone, vanished in the ghostly stampede. I watched the horses turn back toward the orchard. They lowered their heads and grunted softly to one another. They could relax now. The girl who had frightened them so many years ago was finally gone. I waited until the horses had disappeared into the trees. Then I turned and strode back to the house. Sabrina and Clark came rushing across the backyard to greet me, but they stopped when they saw my ugly green rutted face. I heard them gasp when they saw the glow of the glow of evil in their eyes. The glow of evil in my eyes. "Oh, Carly Beth," Sabrina shouted. I picked up the wheelbarrow in the middle of the yard, hoisted it high over my head, and heaved it against the back door. I raised my face to the sky and laughed as the glass shattered. "Go away, both of you," I roared. "I'm not Carly Beth anymore. I am the haunted mask." "No, Carly Beth, we can help you," Clark cried. But I picked up a garden hoe, pulled back my arm, and tossed it at his head. "No!" Clark and Sabrina screamed. Clark ducked, and the hoe sailed over him. I searched for something else to throw. Clark and Sabrina turned and darted back into the house. I raised my head and howled at the moon. I couldn't control my anger. I wanted to pull down the trees and tear the farmhouse apart board by board. I dropped to my knees. Am I doomed to be like this forever? To act and look like this? I asked myself. Is there no cure for me? I remembered that last Halloween. I remembered what the store owner told me about the mask. It can be removed only by a symbol of love. I gazed around. There is no love here, I muttered. There's only fear and anger. Besides, the store owner said the mask could be removed only once by a symbol of love. But I'd defeated the mask then. I'd survived. The store owner said I was the only one. He said he didn't know what would happen. On my knees, on the frozen ground, I screamed at the moon once more. I screamed long and hard. When I lowered my head, I saw the horses returning, stampeding over the tall grass. Once again, their ghostly white manes flew, and their eyes glowed an icy blue, galloping straight at me, coming for me now. I shut my eyes, gritted my teeth, and prepared for the pain. Chapter 27. Kneeling on the ground, I listened to the thunder of hoofbeats. I steadied myself, and felt a tingle on my cheek. I opened my eyes. A horse nuzzled my cheek. Another ghostly pale horse lowered its head and nudged me. It wanted to be petted. I wrapped my arms around a horse's neck, and from some faraway place, I heard a soft voice. Laura's voice. Carly Beth, you were the only one to care for them in all these years, she called to me. The only one to show them any love. It took me a long moment to realize what Laura was talking about. The carrots. I'd brought them carrots, a symbol of kindness and love. My heart pounding, I climbed to my feet, and with a cry of joy, I ripped off the haunted mask. Yes, it came off. It came off. The cool air greeted my burning face. Slowly, the anger and rage floated away. I could feel the mask release its hold on my mind. The horses quickly began to fade. They vanished except for their glowing blue eyes. The eyes floated above me, shimmering against the black sky like stars, and they vanished too. I turned and saw Sabrina and Clark standing outside the back door. I ran to them and threw my arms around Sabrina in a hug. Sabrina, I can't stop shaking, I said, but I'm so happy. The nightmare is over, for everyone. It's finally over. I glanced down. I suddenly realized I still had the haunted mask gripped tightly in my hand. I raised it in front of me. I turned to Sabrina and Clark. We have to bury it again, I said. Right away. I stopped when the mask wiggled in my hand. The ugly green head started to quiver and shake. The fat rubbery lips began to move up and down, and to my horror, I heard its whispered rasp. You're my favorite, Carly Beth. See you next Halloween.